President Trump stands with the people of Iran and has ordered Treasury to sanction members of the regime. Today's sanctions target 18 individuals and entities that the regime uses to evade sanctions on Iranian oil and divert proceeds from its energy sales away from the rightful owners.
The United States has escalated pressure on Tehran, announcing fresh economic sanctions that directly target Iran's top political and security leadership, part of Washington's ongoing effort to hold the regime accountable amid mounting unrest across the country. These new sanctions come at a tense moment, as President Donald Trump continues to issue strong warnings while hinting at possible military intervention, a threat that has kept global attention firmly fixed on the crisis in Iran. On January 15th, U.S. Treasury Secretary Lisa Bessent unveiled a new sanctions package aimed at 18 senior Iranian officials, accusing them of orchestrating widespread human rights violations and suppressing anti-regime protests through violent means. Bessent emphasized that the Treasury Department's latest actions were specifically designed to punish those responsible for the regime's tyrannical oppression, a phrase used to underline America's sharp condemnation of Tehran's brutal crackdown on dissent. Among those sanctioned is Ali Larijani, the powerful secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, who plays a central role in both foreign policy and internal suppression strategies, according to a report by Al Jazeera.
My message today is to the Iranian leadership on behalf of the people of Iran who cannot speak for themselves. Last March, we predicted that President Trump's maximum pressure campaign against the Iranian regime would accelerate an economic collapse. Since then, our sanctions efforts have been effective in slashing oil exports and cutting revenue. The currency and living conditions are in freefall. The early warning signs are already flashing in the Iranian economy. The regime continues to egregiously mismanage its economic resources with additional subsidies and price controls. The central bank is broke and printing money. Hyperinflation is next. Rather than building a prosperous Iran, the regime has chosen to squander what remains of the nation's oil revenues on nuclear weapons development, missiles, and terrorist proxies around the world. Civilians are rightly protesting mismanagement and economic collapse. President Trump stands with the people of Iran and has ordered Treasury to sanction members of the regime. Iran's leaders have brutally responded to peaceful demonstrations with violence, from mass shootings in the street to attacks on wounded victims in hospitals. Today's sanctions target 18 individuals and entities that the regime uses to evade sanctions on Iranian oil and divert proceeds from its energy sales away from the rightful owners, the Iranian people. Tehran's natural resources belong to its people and not its brutal dictators. Treasury will continue to target Iranian networks and corrupt elites that enrich themselves at the expense of average Iranians. This includes the regime's attempts to exploit digital assets to evade sanctions and finance cybercriminal operations. Additionally, President Trump has announced a 25% tariff on countries that continue to do business with Iran. Our message to the Iranian people is clear. Your demands are legitimate. You are protesting for a noble cause, and the United States supports you and your efforts to peacefully oppose the regime's mismanagement and brutality. Our message to the Iranian leaders is also clear. U.S. Treasury knows that like rats on a sinking ship, you are frantically wiring funds stolen from Iranian families to banks and financial institutions around the world. Rest assured, we will track them and you, but there's still time if you choose to join us. As President Trump has said, stop the violence and stand with the people of Iran.
Under the newly announced measures, all US-based assets linked to the designated individuals will be frozen, and American citizens and businesses will be prohibited from engaging in any financial activity with them or their affiliates. Interestingly, the new sanctions coincide with what appears to be a subtle shift in President Trump's approach toward Iran, a partial softening following weeks of threats about potential military strikes in response to Tehran's lethal crackdown. For days, the president had repeatedly warned that the US was prepared to take direct action if Iran continued killing or executing protesters. But in recent remarks, Trump suggested a more cautious path, citing reports that the regime had temporarily halted executions of detained demonstrators. Notably, even as President Trump hinted at potential attacks, Iranian officials responded with stark warnings, cautioning that any US military action would be met with severe retaliation. Iran specifically warned that it could target American interests across the Middle East, with US military bases in the region identified as primary targets. Meanwhile, the White House press secretary addressed questions over whether diplomatic intervention by Arab nations played a role in President Trump's apparent change in stance on Iran.
I wanted to get the White House reaction to Iranian state TV broadcasting an implicit threat to the president's life. It was images of the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, according to reports, with the message, "This time it will not go wrong."
I have not seen that, to be honest with you, Jackie. We'll take a look, and I'll let the president and his national security team examine that footage to ensure its legitimacy. Again, I haven't seen it, so I can't comment on it. What I will say with respect to Iran is that the president and his team have communicated to the Iranian regime that if the killing continues, there will be grave consequences. And the president received a message, as he revealed to all of you and the whole world yesterday, that the killing and the executions will stop. And the president understands today that 800 executions that were scheduled and supposed to take place yesterday were halted. And so the president and his team are closely monitoring this situation, and all options remain on the table for the president.
True that Netanyahu encouraged him against strikes.
Look, it's true that the president spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu, but I would never detail details about their conversation without giving the expressed approval by the president himself.
Two quick questions on Iran. I wanted to ask first, just if you can say, how close was the president to potentially launching strikes last night, and was it the Gulf states that convinced him not to do that, as some of the region there have said?
Well, look, Kelly, I know there's been a lot of speculation in the media about what the president is going to do at any given moment or any given night. And I would say a lot of these stories, to be honest with you, I've been reading them, and they've been based on anonymous sources who are pretending or guessing to know the president's thinking. The truth is, only President Trump knows what he's going to do, and a very, very small team of advisors are read into his thinking on that. And as I just told you, he continues to closely monitor the situation on the ground in Iran. And as we saw yesterday, he had heard that the killings and executions would stop, and we have seen 800 people, their lives have been spared as a result of that. The president continues to closely monitor, but also keep all of his options on the table.